Moed. Kiva Moed. Kiva Moed. Kiva Moed. Kiva Moed. Back to la 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 la. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Lie, lie, lie. One more time. La, 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 lie. La, 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 lie. La, la. On gallery view. It's so good to see everybody. This is so nice. All right, I have 2 minutes before we start. And so how about to get in the mood for next week, why don't we do a Dayenu? Since we got a little time. Hold on. Not in D. John Rosenbluth, what key do we do this in? Okay, great. I got it. We're going to do it in G. See, this is why I forget year to year. Ilu hotzi hotzi anu mi mitzrayim hotzi anu mi mitzrayim dayenu 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 ilu natan lanu et haTorah natan lanu et haTorah dayenu 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 dayenu. Now Shabbat. Ilu natan lanu et haShabbat natan lanu et haShabbat dayenu 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 dayenu. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Hine Matov, how good it is for us all to be together on this day. Oh, those pictures are so cute. Oh, how sweet. Hine Matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 Hine matov umanayim shevet achim
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So nice to see all of you. I'm Rebecca Barancic, filling in for Rabbi Torep, and Barbara Mazer, as you know, is here accompanying us with beautiful music. I want to give a special welcome to Rabbi Joseph Edelheit, who's joining us this evening and will be teaching us later on in the service based on his book, What Am I Missing? Questions about Being Human. Rabbi Edelheit's daughter and family are new members to Temple Beth-El, and Rabbi Edelheit is on his way down here for a couple of months. So I've taken the liberty of interspersing some local photos into our slideshow tonight, just to get him excited, even more excited for his visit down. We're going to have a brief service, about a half-hour service tonight, so that we have room to hear from Rabbi Edelheit. And I'm going to start our service by asking Arlene to unmute, and we will have her do a reading for us.
In God's image, God and God of our ancestors, let us be reminded today that we've all been created in your image. May we encourage each other and build one another up in celebration of our own unique gifts. May we be kind and compassionate to others who reflect your image and likeness in different ways. May we learn and be inspired by these differences. May we truly accept each other in our communities and in our hearts. May it be your will, and may we all do our part. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates all people in your image.
Amen, and thank you, Arlene. And now we will light the candles.
Blessed are you who commands us to kindle the lights of Shabbat. Blessed are you who commands us to kindle the lights of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehalik ner v'tzivanu lehalik ner shel Shabbat, shel Shabbat. Blessed are you who commands us to kindle the lights of Shabbat. We continue with the Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam barei peri hagafen l'chaim. We continue with our call to worship, the Baruch. Starts on a lie, lie, lie. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam ba'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam ba'ed. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. continue with the watchword of our faith, Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad.
And I will ask Steve Jenkins to read for us, please.
Yes. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I really like this quote, and it really talks about how important it is to have someone in your life that fits together with you and makes us all whole. Each life is the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. For some, there are more pieces. For others, the puzzle is more difficult to assemble. Some seem to be born with nearly completed puzzle. And so it goes, souls going this way and that, trying to assemble the myriad parts. No one has within themselves all the pieces of their puzzle, like before the day when they used to seal jigsaw puzzles in cellophane, ensuring that all the pieces were there. Everyone carries with them at least one and probably many pieces to someone else's puzzle. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. And when you present your piece, which is worthless to you, to another, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, you are a messenger from the Most High.
Thank you, Steve. We continue with Mi Chamocha.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? La 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 la. We continue with the Amidah. Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 Spatai Tiftak. Na 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 Ufi Agid. Ufi Agid Tehillat Ekam. Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 Spatai Tiftak. Na 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 Ufi
It's my privilege to read a passage to you from Rabbi Edelheit's book, What Am I Missing? I have instructed my students for decades that formulating a good question is much more valuable than a 25-page essay restating other people's answers. Unanswered questions link decades of humans. Questions are shared ideas being rethought from new contexts. Listening or reading and then stopping to wonder, and then writing a few words, and then finding the courage to raise your hand. And finally, with your heart beating and your eyes looking around you for support, you ask your question. You cannot ever measure the growth gained in just those moments. As I have gathered my missing pieces and given others their pieces, I have grown more confident because of questions. Questions stimulate engagement. You cannot live with a question as a solitary person. You want to think out loud. You need to discuss, debate, get feedback. The best questions force us to take a position. You cannot remain neutral when you are honestly open yourself to the pluralism of ideas. Life-changing questions are invitations to participation without any promises of immediate happiness. It is the growth from such participation and the shared anticipation of our communal conversations that describe my ideal of being human.
A prayer for peace. Peace, peace will come. Let it begin with me. We need peace. Let it begin with me. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Oh, let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come. Let it begin with me. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Ve'al kulam. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Odiavo shalom aleinu. Ve'al kulam. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Oh, let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come. Let it begin with me.
We now come to our Misha Berach prayer, our prayer for healing of mind and body and spirit, where we can be God's partner in helping to support those around us who are in need of strength, whether they are the people who are needing the healing or their caregivers. So I invite you to take a good look at this list and call these members of our temple family and our friends, and call their caregivers. You can be that missing piece that Rabbi Edelheit talks about. If you'd like to add some names that aren't here, I invite you to do so in the chat. If you're on Facebook, I invite you to put it into the Facebook chat, and we will all say the Misha Berach prayer together.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mikor Hara Leim Avotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberan imotenu mikor Abraham laotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
As we come to the Aleinu, I'll just point out to Rabbi Edelheit, because I couldn't write it on here, that this is what our sanctuary looks like, in case you weren't sure. There's the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeg ladon hakol, ateker la liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kiyeh haratzot, velo hasamanu kamishpachot adama, shelo sam kahenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anaknu korim, umishtakavim umodim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlakim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom hachu yikya Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Rebecca, you are on mute if you were talking to us.
But I figured it's my time.
Judy can read my lips. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you to Barbara for leading us in beautiful music. And thank you to Rabbi Edelheit for joining us tonight. And we look forward to learning with you. If you ordered a Seder meal, you should, if you have not received already information about how and when to pick that up, you will get that in an email in the next day or two. Next Friday, we will have our masked up and in-person Shabbat service. It's not going to rain, I promise, and it's not going to be cold. It's going to be beautiful. There are still a few spaces available, so if you'd like to sign up, please go to our website or call the office and sign up. It looks like we're going to have 2 services because we had many people who want to attend. Starting tomorrow, it looks like we will not be having Saturday morning Shabbat services for the next few weeks. You can log on to the Central Synagogue or Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills, and links were provided in a message that you received today. If you need any more updated information, go to our website, to the events page, and you can find out everything that's happening. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you for covering for me when I forgot to unmute. And yes, we are looking forward to seeing all of you face to face, mask to mask, next Friday night. Weather will permit this time. We now turn to our mitzvah of memory, of thinking about those whom we've lost in recent days or in this season in years past. I will, in a moment, give the names of those whom we're thinking of this Shabbat, but you are also free to add in your loved ones in the chat box, or again, if you're on Facebook, please put your loved ones' names there. This week, we are particularly thinking of recent lost loved ones, Andrew Friedrich, the brother of Judy Davis. And on this week, we are also remembering these yard sites: Leonard Applebaum, Laura Ballin, Samuel Barabee, Ida Bernstein, Maris Broyd, Joseph Seaman, Linda Horn-Damewood, Natalie Devac, Henry Dlugo-Pyatt, Edna Feit, Essie Friedberg, Ellen Frolick, Louis Goldstein, Leon Greenberg, Louis Arthur Gross, Stanley Hellman, Sophie Herzog, Kenneth Nobler, Vera Lax, Hortense Lasher, Abraham Moses Lee, Ann Nicolosi, Henry Noble, Alan Nye, Ray Offenberg, Jack Pacharski, Benjamin Roth, David Skalka, Annie Solomon, Robin Elizabeth Thomas Stuck, Mary Kleiman Toomer, Felice Topper, Marie Weitzman, Annie Wides, Isaac Wides, Joseph Wilner, Ida Zelig, and Peter Zumberg. And I believe I have seen some names in the chat. Thank you. May all their memories be for a blessing, Zichrona Livracha. And let's say these words of the mourner's Kaddish together. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad divrach yorotei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mavarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha barechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiram bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mermav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We now come to our closing song, Havana Shira, and at the conclusion of our song, we will have our program with Rabbi Edelheit, so please don't leave.
Havana Shira, come let us sing a song of praise. Havana Shira, Shir hallelujah, Shir hallelujah. 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 Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Barbara. Beautiful as always. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's my pleasure to now introduce our guest for this evening, Rabbi Edelheit. I'm going to ask you to unmute before I forget. Rabbi Edelheit has been a rabbi for over 30 years, and he's professor emeritus of religious and Jewish studies at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. And he has a doctorate in Christian theology and is the author of the recently published What Am I Missing? Questions About Being Human. We're honored to have you with us tonight, Rabbi, as you pose some of those very human questions to us, and hopefully will provide us with some guidance on how to meaningfully answer them. We're hoping you can speak for maybe 20 minutes or so and then leave some time for questions from our congregation. So thank you. I pass the virtual podium to you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Judy. I want to make a shehechianu, and I'll explain in a minute. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. I'm making the shehechianu because literally 1 year ago on this Shabbat, I was supposed to be inside your sanctuary. Your rabbi had graciously invited me to launch this book. It had just been published, and Michael said, come, your kids belong. I had spent the prior Rosh Hashanah, come. We set it all up. And then the world as we knew it then shut down. My doctor in Minneapolis, my doctor in Rio said, Edelheit, passt nicht, you're going nowhere. We don't know what this is. Stop it. I'm back. And I promise, I mean it from the bottom of my heart, no matter when, I will be in your sanctuary as soon as you invite me. My kids belong, and more important, Imertza Hashem, I will have a grandchild in your congregation, and I want to be invited so someday she will say, look, it's Zaydeh. The shehechianu is also to acknowledge my deepest prayers for your rabbi's complete and speedy recovery, that he and his family might be well and he might celebrate the extraordinary fullness of his rabbinate, and he has earned. God bless him. He's here with me in spirit. So, 20 minutes. All 4 of my adult children are counting every one of them, and they won't let me go any further. This book is linked to the next major festival we're going to be doing. It says in Exodus that God wanted a lamb which had to be slaughtered, the blood from which would be used for redemption. Not any lamb, a perfect lamb, bli mum. That bli mum, without blemish, you will see a great deal in this week's Torah portion, Vayikra, Leviticus. All sacrifices had to be bli mum, without any blemish. If after almost 48 years of being a Reform rabbi, I could use my eraser, I would erase the obsessive bli mum. I don't want Jews to focus on perfection. Nobody is perfect. In fact, Nadia Kalmanich, 1976, notwithstanding, she was the first 10. Hadn't ever been a 10 before Nadia. And within 90 minutes, there were 2 10s. Life changed. People's anticipation and expectation changed. If we had more time, I would study with you a recent study done on teen perfectionism and the COVID pandemic. We expect, and especially our teens absorb, the assumption that being good enough is less than. no perfection possible this past year. It wasn't available, and we were not in control. Maybe those of us who struggle with the need to be better than good enough have learned life moves on, and we're all missing something. The passage that Steve Jenkins noted and read so beautifully comes from my friend Rabbi Larry Kushner, the mystic. The idea that we're missing pieces, let me tell you the story in the book that I connect to Kushner. When I was the rabbi in Sinai Temple, Michigan City, we dedicated a Shoah scroll, 1982, from a small Judenrein city in Czechoslovakia. There was a newspaper article with a very young Joseph Edelheit. 2 days later, someone came into my office with a brown paper bag. I saw this picture. I realized I have this for you. He wouldn't stay, didn't want to see the Torah, and never learned his name. Inside the brown paper bag were photos, a white bib with a number on it, and a brown glass bottle. He had been an infantryman who had liberated Dachau concentration camp. 19 years old, he had used this brown glass bottle to scrape the crematory and bring home remains. Michigan City, Indiana, 56 miles due east of Chicago, on the border between Indiana and Michigan. And I sat in my study holding photos and the remains of the Shoah. I used my bar mitzvah talit. A dear friend of mine who was a survivor of terrorism, and we had a private service in the Sinai Temple Cemetery, and we buried those remains. We paid for a monument. I tell that story at the beginning of my book to explain that if I had done nothing else in my career, I would have received a piece of my puzzle. And it would have been enough for me that God let me bury those remains inside a Jewish cemetery in Indiana. My book is about three classic biblical character pairs: Abraham and Rachel, Moses and Miriam, David and Esther. I use these three pairs and match them with three defining characteristics of all Jewish ideas: God, Torah, and Israel. It might interest you that none of all six have all three. Abraham and Rachel do not yet have Torah. They have God and the promise of Israel, but they precede Torah. And they are amazing. We use them in the Avot and Imahot. Miriam and Moses have God face to face. They have Torah in a unique way at Sinai, but they are denied entry into the land. David and Esther, the king and queen, they have more of Israel than anyone. They learn Torah ethics from the prophets, but they don't have God. Esther is one of two books that never mentions God. And when David asked to build the Holy Temple, he was denied because he had blood on his hands. Imagine these six biblical characters: Avraham Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech. And nobody has it all. They're all missing something. I have played with those ideas for more than 30 years, studied, written, given various lectures. And when I retired and moved from Minneapolis to Rio de Janeiro, where I now live, I wrote this book as a vehicle for engaging people with the problem of you can't have it all, you can't know it all, you can't be it all. Each of us in being human needs to reflect upon what we're missing and how, as we learn what we're missing, we are empowered to strive to be more. I would like to change the word perfect from a description to what it was originally. To perfect something meant to finish it, to complete it. I would like us to measure people as they are in the process of finishing, becoming whole, not whether they are flawless. I am worried in our world right now that we are unsatisfied, dissatisfied with people who don't seem to measure up instead of being present in our lives to everyone. The chapter I've written about Moses is called The Good Enough Leader. Some of you might know the famous British psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott. Winnicott worked with infants, mothers who had just given birth. Eve, are you listening to this? Pay special notion. Winnicott said, every mother merely had to be good enough, that babies would have to deal with frustration. Sometimes everyone couldn't be there to do everything for them. That idea of being good enough. You know, Moses isn't going to be mentioned in the Haggadah when you read it next week. Moses is left out of the Haggadah. Moses was an imperfect leader, not a flawed leader, an unfinished, very human leader. We don't read about what Moses does because the Haggadah is about what God does. The rabbis were wise in not making Moses the hero. Nobody can be the hero other than God. When we as human beings have enough perspective to talk about the past year, will we be able to talk about what King David was missing? He was missing any perspective about power. The chapter of that title is called Naked Power because of what King David did with Bathsheba. We have each had to confront how power has been used both for good and not so good, maybe even evil during this past year. How do we measure leaders with regard to their power? Esther, we just finished Purim. Esther is about fear. We need Haman to make sure that we understand how good Esther was. Can you imagine missing something so much that you need fear to make people relate to you? We've also experienced that a great deal this past year. My book is primarily about questions, which is why when I was asked to give you a quote, I gave you from the last 2 pages of the book. The Haggadah is all about questions, isn't it? It begins with questions. You can't tell the story without asking the 4 questions. And it's always the youngest at the table. We want the youngest. We train even the toddlers in our Gan to learn to sing the song. They don't yet understand, but we're giving them the most important role at the table. You ask the question, and everyone else will help you get the answers. We bring them back at the end to look for the afikomen. And again, We have to ask about the afikomen in order to finish the meal. My friends, the questions we're asking today, we're not getting the answers we need or want. We're struggling. We're not in control. I did a great deal of work in the mid-'80s through 2000 with HIV/AIDS. I served on President Clinton's Presidential AIDS Advisory Council. What we faced then, we continue to face, about unknown diseases, about medicine that cannot solve all problems, about freedom and communal needs of control, which don't always fit together. Tens of millions have died of HIV/AIDS globally, and we're still asking the same questions, and the answers that we're being given, people don't like. I tell a story in my book about Richard, and I'll conclude with this story. It's a doorbell here in my son's house. Okay. In 1986, I was a rabbi in Chicago. A young woman called and asked if I would visit her brother, who was in Northwestern Hospital with PCP, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. I asked, doesn't your family have a rabbi, a synagogue? And she said, we do. But when my rabbi found out that my brother had AIDS, he said, there's no place in Judaism for him. I would visit Richard, Olav Sholem, after he got out of the hospital. I brought him a Chanukiah. Brilliant man, worked for the Chicago Public Library. I sat with him for 45 minutes. He grew very weary and said, Rabbi, would you come back? I was putting on my coat at the door, and Richard extended his hand to me. And for one horrific nanosecond, I did nothing. But Richard was sent to me as my teacher, and his hand came closer, and I took it. I went downstairs in the dark, cold Chicago night and cried in my car. I screamed, I cursed. What had I done? I always tell the story about Richard as my act of personal tshuva for that horrific nanosecond. Richard was the first of 32 people I buried from AIDS. I sat with him 6 months later and held his hand as he died. Those questions that could not be answered in 1986, 87, 88, when a poster was made by the UAHC, who will say Kaddish for me? Maybe you remember that poster. That was when the UAHC and CCAR combined forces on the question of AIDS. I bring the stories of my rabbinate into What Am I Missing? To model that I too am missing. I too am not perfect. I too am seeking to find completion. I do so. I share my stories in order to invoke your questions and your stories. I am delighted to have come finally to Beth-El for the first time, and I welcome your engagement and conversation with me as I look forward to building a new relationship in my family's new congregation.
Thank you, Rabbi. We certainly hope this is not the last time that you are visiting us as well. We have time for questions. So I think the easiest way is either if you wave your hand literally, or if you wave your hand through the reactions down on the bottom of your screen probably, or you could feel free to put a question in the chat. While you're all figuring that out, I'll take the liberty of asking the first question to you, Rabbi.
Rebecca.
I definitely like to think that we are all created in God's image, and that's how we learn to be tolerant and empathic of others and accepting of others. So what piece do you think God is missing?
Wonderful. I write about that in my
I
last
haven't-
chapter.
I haven't gotten that far.
Yes, I know. When Moses meets God at Exodus 3:14, that idea of the burning bush, and God gives forth a name that is terribly mistranslated, Ehiyah Asher Ehiyah. It is not the King James Version, I am that I am. Forget that. Ehiyah in Hebrew is the imperfect first person. Imperfect, usually translated as future. My buddy Kushner translates it as, I am that which I have yet to become. So it's not that God is, quote, missing something. It's that God is not yet complete. We, in our relationship in knowing God, Ehiyah Asher Ehiyah. I don't like translating it, Rebecca. I am that which I have yet to become. That yet to become is that which emerges in relationship to you, Rebecca, to me, Joseph. It's that which, when God is known and experienced, God becomes, completes. And I think if we look at that which is missing as that which is not yet finished, rather than missing as flawed, we will help each other better experience our always emerging wholeness.
Thank you. I love that answer. Other questions? Yes, from the Herman family. I'll ask you to unmute, Ed. Could you unmute it?
Rabbi, I enjoyed your presentation greatly. I
Thank
have a
you.
question.
Please.
Many Auschwitz survivors ask, where was God during Auschwitz? How do you answer it?
My answer is, first, I was born in 1946, but members of my family perished in 3 camps. I have taken interfaith groups to be present at Bergenau, at Auschwitz. My answer is that God was there in every act of compassion between human beings. God was there as a source of the unfailing hope that some found and were able to use to survive. God was there in the mystery of why some survived and others did not. Where God was not there was in halting human evil. Human evil is completely human, both in emergence and in responsibility. So if when you ask where was God, could God have stopped it? My answer is no, because if God had stopped it, God would also have had to stop the goodness that a human being does. Our ability to be human, to be free, to make choices. Moshe Rabbeinu is not allowed into the land because he strikes the rock twice. We need to remain still human enough, Ed, so that we can make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and become more complete. I am not a survivor, nor am I the child or grandchild of a survivor. I give you an answer as a thinker, as someone who has stood next to the crematory, but I also stand mute in the face of those who did survive. I don't offer an answer to anyone who lived it.
Thank you.
I was remiss in not inviting people from Facebook to ask questions. So please, if you're on Facebook, we have Kendra is kindly monitoring Facebook so she can ask questions from there.
By the way, this is what the book looks like.
Thank you. Do we have other questions here? Jackie, is your hand up? You're vertically challenged again.
Of course, with my eyesight, I cannot read, Rabbi. Is it available for on Kindle?
It is available on Kindle, and while I'm in St. Petersburg, I hope I'll have enough time to record an audio book. People have asked.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And Rabbi, what are you doing in Rio? And tell us more about that.
I retired from the State University, and my son said for a second time, and decided all four of my adult children were all over North America, and it was time for me to be truly with my beloved, a woman I had met in 2011. So in 2016, I moved. I now am a volunteer rabbi and have founded a little Reform congregation in Paraná. I teach at the new Rabbinic Instituto for Latin America, and also am a fellow at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And my children are waiting for the third and fourth retirements. And I've written this book, so I've had time. I have a new book coming out at the end of April, a more academic book about the philosopher of Paul Ricoeur.
Sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to ask you to unmute if I did. Okay. Oh, there you are. Sorry, my screen just flipped around, so I got lost. I wanted to ask you also about your PhD in Christian theology and how does that add to your rabbinate?
I went to the University of Chicago Divinity School, which I'm very, very honored to tell you has just recognized me as Alumnus of the Year for 2021. I am the first rabbi in the history of the University of Chicago Divinity School to be recognized for my interfaith work. I went because as a rabbi, I wanted to study with Christians to better understand how to engage them in interfaith dialogue. I'll give you a story as the answer. Is that all right? When I was 7 years old, I lived on a block in San Francisco. There were 3 boys. One had a ball, one had a bat, and one had a glove. I walked across the street to ask my friend, who had just come home from catechism from Holy Name Church, "Can you come out and play?" He had the ball. And he said, "I can't play ball anymore with a Christ killer." I was 7, he was 7. I didn't know Christ. I was pretty sure I hadn't killed him, but he had learned that in catechism. That stayed with me in such a formative way that I have made interfaith dialogue essential in such a way that if I can prevent one more Jewish child at any age from feeling what I felt, my whole rabbinate will have been possible. This morning I had breakfast with my oldest friend from Minneapolis, a Catholic priest. He was the rector of the Basilica of St. Mary. We took 84 people to Israel together and 48 people to Auschwitz and Rome together. Our work together, the Basilica of St. Mary and Temple Israel, we funded a memorial to the small town in Czechoslovakia where our Shoah scroll came from. The first Catholic church and synagogue anywhere to do it together. That's why I went to the University of Chicago.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Pamela, do you have your hand up? I'm not sure. I think I asked you to unmute, but I don't hear you. You may need to put it in the chat.
I also see the Hermans might have their hand raised.
Yes. You don't have, if you have I know there's a lot going on in your beautiful mind. So if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. And Hermans, I lost you, but let me find you. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, I'm muted now. Okay, did you?
Perfect.
Could you tell us, Rabbi, about the Jewish community in Brazil?
Yes, there are a little over 100,000 Jews in Brazil. Brazil is the largest country in Latin America. It is unique because it speaks Portuguese and has a strong link still with Portugal. The Jews, the first Jews that came to North America, 23 Jews, came from Recife, Brazil. They landed in New Amsterdam, running away from the Portuguese Inquisition in 1654. They would not be let in by Stuyvesant, Peter Stuyvesant, the governor of New Amsterdam. But among the 23 refugees had family in Amsterdam that were stockholders in the Dutch West Indies Company. And so the Dutch West Indies Company required those 23 Jews, Sephardim, to be let into what became New York. Most of the Jews today in Brazil are Ashkenazim. Most of them came from Bessarabia, the former Ukraine, what we call the Ukraine now. 30,000 in Rio, maybe 60,000 in São Paulo, the largest city, and 10,000 scattered throughout. There is a unique group with whom I've done some work called B'nai Anusim. The B'nai Anusim are usually what we would call poorly in English mulattoes. These are people who have been birth miscegenated from both slaves and Indians. They're darker, but they lay claim to identity from among the colony that originated Recife in the 17th century. They are trying to reclaim their Jewish identity. The Jews, there are three significant Reform congregations, one in Rio, one in São Paulo, a small one in São Paulo, and then in Belo Horizonte and Porto Alegre. I was embarrassed about how little I knew. Great Jewish literature, great Jewish art. It is a community that is thriving. Right now, I talked to family before I came online. The COVID is very bad. Rio and São Paulo are almost locked down again, and they don't have access to as much vaccine. So I invite you to come, and I'll bring you to my congregation in Rio. My Rabbi Sergio Margulis is wonderful. We have a brand new, fabulous female chazan from Argentina. It's a wonderful, vibrant community.
When we can all travel.
And there is a woman watching, yes, probably from my congregation, Beit Tikva in Maringá, my little community.
Oh, very nice. Well, thank you, Rabbi, for all of your teaching and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm going to allow everyone to, I think, unmute if they want, so that we can all wish each other Shabbat Shalom. And of course, if anyone has other questions for Rabbi, please feel free to shout them out or chat them out.
It's such a difficult way to meet people. I'm very grateful you've allowed me in at a unprecedented time in your congregation's wonderful history. And I won't wait very long to be invited. I will come back quite regularly. You will have to keep me away. And I hope we will be able to meet and talk in person from the deep depth of my heart. I thank you for embracing my children and soon to be their child. And I look forward to being part of your community. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi.
I wanted to ask
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And I've already purchased your book, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Mom and Dad.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, David.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks for sharing, Sarah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Ed and Helena, is your hand up